As soon as the train's gone past, of course there's no vacuum in the pipe, and the weight of this will bring it back down. Whether they ever installed it, I have no idea. But this is just one of hundreds of things they must have developed to make this system work. Some drawings now. We're lucky to have these drawings. And there's a chap, William Dawson, he lived in the cathedral yard in Exeter, and he was an architect, but he had a sideline on the side, before photography came along, of making drawings and paintings which he would flog to rich people. So this is his sideline, and that's what all these were produced. Normally we'd show you a sort of country mansion in a big estate, and you would usually show it finished, even if you'd only just planted the trees and they were 4 foot tall. You would show them nice and big, because they were more impressive. And there's an element of that in some of these paintings that he's done. But he did the whole railway line. He saw this as quite a business opportunity. So this is Exeter St David's. Bristol is this way. We're down here. This side here's the River Exe. And the original stations, you always had 2 of them, one for departures and one for arrivals, but they were on the same track, one in front of the other. Reading, Bristol, they were all made like this. And you had loads of turntables. They didn't go in for what we call switches and crossings like we do today. Loads and loads of turntables everywhere. But the engine house was right here. And it's where the big new building is now. When you go into St David's Station, on the left is the new signal box. I say new, it's been there about 10 years, 20 years. But it's huge. And that's where the engine house was. And they didn't have their own station, they rented space in the Bristol and Exeter. And the Bristol and Exeter were shareholders of the South Devon Railway, so they had a vested interest. And just like today, most passengers didn't want to go to St David's, they all got off at Exeter St Thomas. And the South Devon encouraged them to do that because they had to pay a penny a person or something like that for every passenger of theirs that went through B&E station. So if they got off at their own station, they didn't have to pay that. So that's what happened. We come along, this is Powderham. If you can see it at the back. This is the boathouse at Powderham. The castle's over here. I don't know whether that footbridge ever was built, but it might have been. That bridge is still there, and this is the roadway that you can drive along now. Although they put up restriction signs, they don't like you driving there now unless you live there. So this is the boathouse again. Powderham Church is over here on the left. And you can see how the railway followed the river. And all these lagoons got created. And of course the road has moved, but this is where it floods today. And you get the deer there often if you go along there on your bicycle or walking, and the deer gather there. Oh, not too far. And Star Cross is over here. This is... He's a bit odd with the pictures. This is supposed to be, generally one looks one way and one looks the other way. So this is looking at Powderham Castle. This is where the river used to go up to the castle, almost to the castle walls years ago, when there was a harbour up there. And here's the railway line and the pipe on the top. Now this is Star Cross, and this is where the bicycle car park is now with Ting Bean's coffee shop, right here. And this was a lagoon. Here's Star Cross, and it's this lagoon here, at the end of the town. And this is the ferry terminal and the station today, and the engine house. And it's quite odd what's going on here. There's obviously evidence that when they had to build the railway, they dug into the ground alongside and put it there. I mean, why walk it miles when you can dig it out and chuck it up on the side? But also, they had openings under the railway to let the tide go in and out. And what happened is these lagoons then dried out and they were absolutely stinking. All the seaweed gathered there. You can imagine all the effluent, if that's the right word, from the town ended up in there as well, and the whole place was stinking. And only this morning I was reading a newspaper, 1847, so a little bit later, the whole town was complaining. Typhus was rampant, and we know today it's spread by lice and fleas, but those days they thought it was spread by this stench, the miasma coming from the South Devon Railway. And there's loads of complaints that went on and on. And I think what they're doing is that about once a year they put a load of men in, they dug all this muck out and took it away. And that's what's going on here. Of course, later on they filled it in again, put the car park on so that team didn't have their coffee shop. Here's the engine house at Starcross with its chimney complete. It's not reduced to this height there. And they sort of remodelled the terminal. And the ferry port here was very, very important. Exmouth was quite a desirable place, but no railway. So it used to say Starcross for Exmouth. And there were all sorts of passengers, deliveries, for years and years, went through here. And the ferry was owned by the railway for many years. Of course, once Exmouth got its own railway, that was the end of that. Moving along, this is Cockwood. So you've got the Anchor pub today. This shows the viaduct that was built. It was supposed to be an embankment, and they started building the embankment, and the notes say, we tipped the spoil out. When we came back in the morning, it had all disappeared into the mire. It just sank and sank and sank. So only about 6 months before they opened it, Brunel said, enough's enough, give up. The contractor had gone bust, and he got his friend George Hennett to build a viaduct. Oh. So here's the viaduct, which he built all the way across in a matter of months. Pile driver, timber on the top, open for business. Where are the other pictures? So now they're not all aligned. So this is Cockwood Harbour. Then you come along, and you can see there's big lagoons now. And this is sort of the Warren is here, and the golf course about there. And this is now the caravan park. But in those days, of course, it was the river, the marsh, the sea. Here's a picture down below looking the other way. And I think this is Easton, because there's no pub here. And this is the lagoon close. This is Easton House, and my daughter lives just here. And they extended this sort of jetty and a pier here, and it was called, is it called Jay's Pier or something? When you drive along the road, there's a sign on a piece of wood on the fence, and it says Jay's something or other, and that's the same name that's on these old coins. Then we come along, this is Langston, so you've got the Warren here. This is Langston Cutting, a rock with a hole in it. Dawlish Warren goes out there, and Cockwood's just to the left. But you can see it going here on the drawing. The cutting's been widened many, many times over the years. This is a view looking the other way, and this is Langston Cliff Hotel, sitting up. Oh, that one is like that. This is Mount Pleasant, and there used to be a ferry somewhere only in the 1840s from Dawlish Warren to Exmouth because it was shorter, and probably you didn't have to pay so much as for Cross. And the pub at the bottom of the road there, is it called the Mount Pleasant Inn? That was the waiting room for the ferry. And you would wait there till you could see the ferry come, then you would walk down the lane, across the sand dune, and get on the boat, a bit like we do at Chelmsford. And of course, when the railway came, that was all going to be cut off, so they were all up in arms, and that was one of the issues raised in Parliament, to reinstate the road. Of course, it's that little tiny narrow bridge that we have now, and that all dates to the summer ferry. Then we go along, where are we now? Dawlish. So Dawlish Station is on the left. This is going along on the beach. Oak Cove is here, Kenaway Tunnel, got some sort of signal here. It doesn't line up with the drawing below, but this is the station here, and then when you look the other way, you've got Kenaway Tunnel here, Kenaway House as it was then, and the station is actually back here. Here's the colonnade, and the railway's on the beach, not up in the air like it is today, down on the beach. And Brunel actually proposed bringing the railway around the outside, so we could miss out the first 3 tunnels we have today. but the Admiralty engineer at Parliament said that this is not satisfactory, it's too exposed, you need to bring it back inland a bit. Hence all the big cuttings and rock cliffs and so on. This is from top of Lee Mount, looking the other way. Here's the station, a much better view of it. Single-sided, one platform, no secondary track yet, running on the beach. And all this used to exist. Of course, it all fell down sometime or other, and the council had to clear it up. But this is where we come on a footpath. There's a little gate on the top of Dawlish Road here, and it used to connect. It connects this to what used to be a big house over here. So this was their pleasure garden. So when you walk there today, that's what you'll see. We come around the cliffs, then we get to the famous Parsons Tunnel. There's a job to work out what's going on in the pictures. But this is Hull Head. This is what's it called? Clark's Tunnel. And Parsons Tunnel's down here. And you come round the bend. There's loads of mentions of Breaches Rock, and that's where it is, Breaches Rock, right here. And then you go through Parsons Tunnel onto our bit of the sea wall. Now I think this is Railway Tunnel, this is Corriton Cove, and then Parsons Tunnel is way down here. And I presume he couldn't stand out in the sea and do his painting, so that's why it's all a bit offset. Then we get into Teignmouth. This is we come along the sea wall. Here is the approach to Teignmouth, St Michael's Church, and here this was a real tunnel. Lasted out through the rock, and today Eastcliff Bridge is right over the top. Spray Point is here. In Brunel's notes, he says, we tidied it up. So this is an ancient rock form. All the cliff fell down like that. And some of it had already been cleared, but obviously put a level area. I'm sure it was a construction site. And then they used it as a breakwater and protection for the railway. And there used to be some breakwaters sticking out here. That one's still there, or the remains of it. This one is gone, but they are shown on this drawing. Then we come into Teignmouth. This is Teignmouth town, and here's Sheldon Bridge. So 1827 Sheldon Bridge, so I've been there a few years. And this is Sheldon Bridge. Now, the toll house is there now, but it used to be here. So when the railway came through, not only did all this lagoon this side get filled in, but they had to move the toll house. This is looking the other way. So you've got Bitton House, which I presume is here somewhere. Here is the bridge. This is Teignmouth itself. Okay. Right, so we're under construction. They started at the Exeter end coming this way. The viaduct where St Thomas Station is, I don't know how many arches, 161 is it? Something like that. That was all timber by our good friend George Hennett, as was the bridge over the River Exe at the end of the station at St David's. George Hennett, another timber bridge. And within less than 8 months, the viaduct was complete. The track bed was complete to powder, and they must have had hundreds of men working on it. And but copwood was falling into the mire, as we talked about, and eventually they changed it. Various winter storms had delayed walk on the sea wall. If you walked along the sea wall, you'll notice there's two sorts of rock in it. There's the great big clumps of Haytor granite with the lovely big white crystals in it. They came down Templars Railway to Venford, then on the canal boat, and some of those boats would come all the way to New Quay. Then they got offloaded, probably some went on a ship maybe, but most of the rock ended up on the beach, and then they put it in the wall. The limestone came from, is it called Long Nose Point in Babbacombe. If you ever go out there in a boat, before you get to Hope's Nose itself, there's a huge point, but it's now only 15 feet above sea level. People camp on it. That was all a big cliff at one time. And the limestone was dug out, put in a boat, brought all over the place, but ours came to the beach. The Ness, the lime kiln by Ness Tunnel, That's where that limestone came from. They took it off a boat, took it up the hill and burned it there to put it on the land. So that was basically where it came from. 13-inch pipes were being built by George Hennett, and then we start to get the first sort of problems. So 1845, they've been going a year. Croydon experienced their railway opened in January, so they had 6 months of experience. Brunel was obviously waiting to see how they got on, and he realised 13-inch pipes too small. That's a bit of a problem because they've already cast 1,500 tonnes of it. That met the spec, which is a third of it. So we increased the pipe. Yeah, we'll make it bigger. The idea was all these pipes would be smelted down and recast, but they weren't. A lot of them were just put to one side to avoid delay. Some went up to Bristol and were then sold for scrap from Bristol docks. So that's what happened. It was a bit of a waste, so you had delay in cost. And in December, 6 months later, they're now busy laying the bigger pipe from Exeter coming along the coast. And by March 1846, so 2 years since we started, the railway is substantially complete except for the pipe. The pipe had got, I think, as far as Paragon still. Didn't get much further. Yeah, 8 miles delivered, so 8 miles installed, that's star-crossed. But nowhere near ready for opening. Work is in progress, the engine houses haven't been built, and the reason for that was, if you don't know what size pipe you're going to build, you don't know how big an engine is, and you don't know how big the boilers are, which affects the size of the house. It didn't help that the one turf lot kept sinking into the ground, and the chimney kept falling over at Star-Cross. And they rebuilt that a few times, and the board were getting very itchy, but particularly the shareholders. So they made the decision it would open on the 13th of May. And they didn't talk to Brunel about this, which was a bit of a problem, because the railway in his view wasn't ready. But it wasn't they didn't want to talk to him, he wasn't there, because he was working all over the country, communication was difficult, and so on. So when he found out, he said, oh, that's right, do. But eventually they decided on the 30th of May, and there must have been some commercial men in the SBR, because they said, that's with bank holiday, that'd be a good weekend to open, everybody would be out, we'll make a bit of money. And that's what happened. But they opened Loco Hall. So it was conventional locomotives which they rented from the Great Western Railway, and it opened on the 30th of May. But it's still just over 2 years from when it was authorised. Can you imagine all that work, all those cliffs, all that demolition, explosions, digging it out, building the viaducts, the bridges, all within 2 years. These days they could even decide to do it within 2 years, never mind build it. And they would open to Newton Abbot at the end of the year. So let's picture we're on opening day, these primitive locomotives, and they were hiring them at power by the mile. People invented that in about the 1980s, or reinvented it, but they were doing it in Brunel's time. They rented the locomotives, power by the mile done, 1 shilling and 4p. So they knew exactly what it was costing them to run the railway. And the locomotives, they were called Snake and Piper, but someone said, well, that's no good, we better call them Exantine. So they took the plates off and put some new plates on for the opening day. And they set out from Exeter along the new line, and then there were going to be big celebrations in Teignmouth. Now, the first problem they had was not everybody was at the station to leave Exeter on time, because in those days you had local time and London time. And the railway ran on London time, which was about 20 minutes different to local time. Eventually everybody ran on railway time. That was the first problem. And hundreds of people came, and the train got to Teignmouth in what, 40 minutes? What does it take to go? 34 or something? We haven't advanced much. And it stopped along the way, picking people up, and just bands playing. And they used to have all these traditional songs. The Conquering Hero Comes. It applied to Nelson, and they applied it to Brunel. flagships in the harbour blowing their hooters, and so on. And they had a quick lunch. They were only here, is it an hour? And then it went back to Exeter, where they picked up everybody else. But it travelled 38 minutes coming back, and it carried thousands of people over the weekend. And one train, Whit Monday, 1,500 people on the train. You'll see what it looked like in a minute. 21 carriages. Carriages probably overstating what it was just a truck. And it's interesting, the word carriage comes from horse and carriage, and we still use that term today, even though we haven't had horses on the railway for a long time. This is what the engine looked like. The boiler is now horizontal, designed by Gooch. It's still got a big chimney to make the thing work. One big driving wheel. The small wheels are just to hold the engine up. Tender at the back, and they would go about 60 miles an hour. So that's pretty good going. This is a replica of one available, the Firefly in Didcot. So you can see it and work it. You can go have a ride on it up and down. And so we got this initial operation, but it's with locomotives, and really they're never going to get over this. Once they've introduced locos, so there's no coming back. So lots of people, they had an electric telegraph. This was one of the first railways that had electric telegraph. The idea was you could communicate with the engine house and tell them when to evacuate the pipe. For some reason, totally unknown, nobody knows why, they only ever connected it to the stations. They never connected it to the engine house. And they used it for signalling rather than for controlling the vacuum pipe, which caused all sorts of problems later on. They ran 7 trains a day, 3 each way on Sunday, just 1 train at a time on the line. Went out and it came back. 10,000 passengers a week, 100 a train, weekly receipts. They're in the money, £600 a week, and so that's about £80,000 a week today. And by the end of December, the end of the year, they carried 250,000 people. Unheard of. Unheard of. So the railway's working, and you could go to London, it took you 8 hours. You had to change trains at Exeter, and I suspect at Bristol as well. And the fare was 17 shillings and 4p. So that, if you think that's £130, what's a first class fare to London? About the same as the first class to London today. But it compared with several days by horse and coach, and I think 3 days on the ship. Very few coaches were covered. Only first class had a roof, or roof and windows. Second class had a roof, no windows. Third class was just a truck, and you sat on a few hay bales. Heating on those that had windows was by hot sandbags. So you would heat them in the fire, and then when the train came, you opened the door and chuck them in. Have a hot water bottle, and you put your feet on it. And the trains were full of buskers, selling you ointments, creams, potions, and snake oil, everything you could think of. Some might sing, I suppose. And that's how it worked. Here's the timetable. Very interesting what they included. I talked about the accommodation. But the fare table, it says horses, carriages, dogs and fish will be conveyed, but no goods. And they hadn't really gone into goods or parcels or freight. You know, somehow it just wasn't in their thinking. It came though, but horses were. And most people, a lot of those who could afford it, the landed gentry, you would go with horse and carriage to the station at Teignmouth. You would tell him in advance you were coming. He would have a flat wagon there. You would put your carriage on one. You would put your horses in a horse box, and then you would get on. They would attach it to the train, usually by pushing, and then off you would go. And you'd get it off and you'd grab it, and then you could go riding with the hunt or whatever, and then come back later on. So it was quite an important part of the business. But no goods. Here's a few pictures of what it looked like. So this is coming out of Parsons Tunnel along the sea wall, and whether the boat is over there, but there's a bit more of the Parson than is there today. But it's a steam engine, broad gauge, single track. Here's a similar picture, but a bit more artistic license. So they've got the idea of one big wheel, but they've missed out some of the others. You've got covered carriages for first class, second class, open trucks for third. They never really liked third class people because they didn't pay enough. And they restricted them in all sorts of ways. Here's the tunnel at Eastcliff. There was no extension, there was no walkway to start with, and the council wrote to the railway and said, oh, will you complete the wall and do that? And they wrote back and said, well, if you want it, they'll build it yourself. Which is what happened. Right. Here's a drawing of Teignmouth, but what it shows is this is St Michael's Church, but here is Brunel's chimney on the engine house. So the engine house was on the upside, the north side, Holden side of the station. And roughly, you know where Roman glass is? Do you ever go down there? Roman glass is built right where the engine house was. And opposite, where you sometimes park your car, there must have been a big pond there. And the reason the station is there is that was all a boggy marsh. It's called Frog Marsh. They've still got it on one of the street names. And that's why there were no houses there. But they had lots of other problems getting through Teignmouth, so this is one example. So here's the station at this end. Here's the URC church here, at Dawlish Road when we come down the hill. This is Glendarrow. And the rock tunnel finished here somewhere. Somewhere between Dawlish Road and Eastcliff, the other end of Eastcliff car park. And then this bit, they called it a covered way. Today we would call it a cut and cover tunnel. And the idea is you do it quick. So you dig the ground out, sides almost vertical, and you put the railway in, cover it over, and try and fill it in again before it all collapses. Of course, they didn't always get it right, but that's the thinking behind it. That's how you did it. The Roman Catholic Church was here. They opened this up, they had to move it, which is why we've got St Patrick's over here now. There was a Methodist graveyard here, and I think they went up to the New Grave Cemetery was open then up on the next door to us. So I suspect that's where they went. And all this lot got knocked down. Here's Alberta House where George Hennett came to live, and the station here. Now this is when they're opening it up again, when they realised this wasn't quite such a good idea, 1880-ish. But it gives you an idea of what it's like. So you've got steep cuttings in the bottom of the railway, you put a tunnel over the top, and then you backfill it all. This was all Eastcliff Garden. So Eastcliff House was here in the car park. This was all their pleasure garden. And where the Lido is was also in this garden. And there's a little courtyard of sheltered housing in the back there. That was also part of his garden. It was a chap, was it John Strachan, I think? He lived there, and he was a big shareholder. He thought the railway would be good for him through all his activities in the town. So he was in support of ruining his garden. This shows, this is it, Eastcliff Bridge, not yet. It's got to be built because previously this had been a rock tunnel. Here's another view, so you've got covered way, station, and then another covered way all the way down to where the docks start. And if you go over Willow Street, Footbridge, turn left, there's new housing there. When you get to the bend at the end, that's where the tunnel finished. And then it was open into the port. Again, turntables here. This was some sort of warehouse shed. It was there before the railway came. And when they started carrying goods in freight, they said, oh, this will be our goods shed. So they adopted it. And they had a turntable in the down line, and they had a movable platform. They pulled the lever, the platform apart, and then shoved the wagons off the main line into this goods shed, the end on. Because eventually they put it all over here. This shows the engine house and the pond. Here's what it looked like. So this is the sort of taxi service. There was another turntable here, a siding came out, and this is where you loaded your horse and carriage to be put on the train. And the station is very basic, just this, and they only built it a few weeks before they opened it. They did extend it later on. And this is the extended view, 1880. Here it is again. You can just see where the siding was here. People waiting to be collected. I think this is the bus to Bishop's Tainton. And the goods shed is just here. It came out there. And this was built, extended for refreshment rooms. They realised in those early days refreshment rooms made money. And of course it's still there. If we leave the station behind, over here, you can see how the railway cut across all these streets. This also shows you where you find this information. So this drawing comes from the Methodist history book, because they had a chapel here that had to be demolished. The railway paid for it. With the money that they got, they built the one they currently have in Somerset Place. So called because the Duke of Somerset owned the building that was there before. And but all these streets were cut through. The railway was put in cut and cover, then they were all reinstated until the Germans came and blew them all up. Then the ring road came and the council finished it off. Here's all sorts of odd pictures. This is supposedly a picture of Sheldon Bridge, but what it does show is a train coming along the railway line here. There. Now whether this house ever existed or is Bitton House, I think this is Bitton House, but it's actually further up the hill. This is St James's Church. Here's a view the other way, so we're sat in Morrison's, Broad Meadow. Sheldon Bridge is up there. All this rock used to stick out. You know, if you're familiar, the main road did not go where it went today. It went up Mill Lane into Bishop's Tainton and over the top. Or if you really wanted to, there was a lane that came up here and went up to Bishop's Tainton, and that lane's still there. But all the roads basically blocked. You can see the state of the highway. And but here is a train, steam hauled, and it shows two tracks. So whether this is a second track or a siding, this would have been a lagoon originally, and it's got filled in. So maybe the siding was in connection with the filling in. The operation, we talked about it in general. A few things happened. They didn't order the engines for a long time. But in February 1847, so we're 15 months after they started, the first piston carriage arrived. It came from London in a wagon, and when they got it to Exeter, they just took it out, put it on the track, and within an hour, they opened up the engine at Countess Weir and Turf Lock, and they shot off for a joyride that very evening up to Turf Lock. Whether the pub was open, I don't know. I imagine it was. And that was the very first ride. After that, of course, they had official tests of Brunel came and all the rest of it. And it worked. Didn't work for long because the engine house at Countess Weir, where we go over